I went to a cabin in Colorado 5 months ago. I had just turned 34 and lost my job in the city. I thought some time alone in the mountains would help. I was looking for peace, you know? I had never imagined what would happen there. The cabin was remote. When I got out of the car, the snow crunched under my boots. Trees loomed all around, their branches heavy with snow. It felt serene at first. I unpacked my bags, and flurries began to fall. That light snow soon turned into a heavy blanket covering everything. Day after day, I didn't see any other person, just me and the wind whispering in the trees. One night, a storm hit. I sat by the fireplace, watching the snow swirl outside. That's when I heard it, a faint tapping at the window. I thought it was nothing, just branches moving. But the tapping grew steady. I felt a chill run down my spine. Maybe it was just the storm playing tricks on me. I was uneasy. The next morning I discovered snow footprints leading to my door. My heart raced. They were too big for any animal. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. Just nature, right? But each night the whispers returned, and they felt too close. I still couldn't make out the words, but they tugged at me, beckoning me to the trees. I spent nights jumping at every sound. One night a loud thump came from the attic. My heart was pounding as I grabbed a flashlight. I peered up the stairs, but only darkness greeted me. Maybe it was just mice. I didn't know. Then one day I went out to clear my mind. I spotted someone in the distance, a dark figure standing still. I squinted, searching for details, but it vanished. I felt a really cold shiver run through me. It was like someone was watching, but nobody was there. The isolation was messing with me. That night, the tapping started again. I lay in bed, too scared to look outside. I could hear the whispers getting a bit louder. I held my breath and finally mustered the courage to peek. There was nothing, just the quiet of the snow. But I could feel a presence, that creeping sensation like someone waited just outside. What was happening? My stomach twisted in knots. Were the whispers in my mind or out there? Was I losing it? The cabin felt alive, like it had secrets to share but wouldn't let me in. I spent my days feeling trapped. Each night brought that tapping and the whispers that wouldn't let me sleep. I came to realize that I was no longer alone. Something lurked in the shadows. I didn't know what it was or what it wanted. I just knew I was in a place where the unknown thrived, and I couldn't escape it. I never went back after I left. Who were those whispers? What had I disturbed? I still wonder about that cabin, the never-ending mystery, and the presence that seemed connected to the land. I can't shake the feeling that it still watches. I didn't sleep that night. I tossed and turned, gripping the sheets tightly as the wind howled outside. My mind raced, questioning every noise. The strange tapping didn't subside. It continued like a drumbeat against the window. I tried to hide under the blankets, but nothing could shield me from that gnawing sense of dread. The next morning I decided to take action. If something was watching me, I would face it head-on. I gathered my courage, put on my thick jacket, and slipped on my boots. I needed to explore the woods. I hoped I could find tracks or something, anything that would help explain what was happening. As I stepped outside, I felt an uneasy silence. The snow lay thick and untouched, making it hard to discern which way to go. It felt strange, almost too quiet. Even the birds that usually flitted around were absent. I ventured past the cabin, heart pounding, trying to act brave. After a short walk, I came upon a glade where the trees parted. In the center, I noticed a large, dark shape half buried in the snow. As I approached, my stomach dropped. It was an old wooden totem, jagged and rough, with markings carved deep into the surface. They were almost unrecognizable under a layer of frost, but something about them sent chills down my spine. I knelt beside it, my fingertips tracing over the cold wood. These carvings weren't ordinary. They felt wrong, as if they were made to keep something trapped. I could hear those whispers again, almost like they were echoing from the totem itself. I couldn't decipher the words, but my name floated through my head, mixed with indecipherable syllables. Suddenly, I heard a rustle behind me. I jumped to my feet, scanning the trees for movement. Nothing, just the quiet woods. I shook my head, trying to dismiss my overactive imagination. Then, just as I turned back to the totem, I noticed a branch snap in the distance. There it was again, a shape, a figure darted between the trees just out of sight. My heartbeat quickened. It had to be real. I began to rush back to the cabin, panic rising in my chest. I wasn't alone anymore. As I reached the cabin, the winter sun began to dip below the horizon. The shadows grew long, darkness creeping back, bringing a palpable feeling of unease. Once inside, I locked the door tight and pulled the curtains closed. The tapping resumed on the window, this time louder, more urgent. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking. I wanted to call someone, anyone, but the signal was spotty. I realized I might be truly isolated. That's when I found more footprints in the snow outside. Only these weren't just leading to my door. They were circling the cabin. My breath caught in my throat. I had an urgent need to understand. Who was there with me? I felt trapped, like a prey being stalked. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. Then I heard a loud thump from the attic once more. It resonated through the floorboards, and I froze. I knew what I had to do. I needed to face whatever was up there. I grabbed the flashlight and headed for the stairs leading to the attic, my fingers gripping the rail tightly. That's when everything went dark. I stood in the pitch blackness, heart racing. The only sound was my own breath, shallow and quick. I blinked, hoping to adjust to the darkness, but it was thick and oppressive, swallowing me whole. The flashlight was useless now. I fumbled with it, but the beam refused to flicker to life. Then came another thump from the attic. It was louder this time, echoing through the silence like a warning. My gut screamed at me to turn back, but fear pushed me forward. I took a tentative step up the stairs, one hand gripped tightly on the railing. Each creak of the old wood sent chills shooting down my spine. When I reached the attic door, I paused to listen. Was something moving up there? My mind raced with the last few hours. The whispers, the figure in the trees, the footprints. This could mean something, but what? I reached for the doorknob, fingers trembling. The sudden thought struck me, what if whatever was up there didn't want to be found? I swallowed hard, steeling myself, and twisted the knob. The door cracked open slowly, more creaks spilling out. A sliver of moonlight spilled into the darkened attic, highlighting dust motes dancing in the air. Once inside, I scanned the room, letting my eyes adjust. Shadows loomed, things stacked against the walls that I couldn't quite make out. It felt claustrophobic. The air was stale, thick with the scent of age and neglect. My pulse hammered, and I felt the cold seep into my bones. Then I saw it. A pile of old trinkets cluttered in one corner, faded photographs, torn books, and various oddities. Among them lay a small, leather-bound journal. I hesitated, sensing it was something I shouldn't touch, but curiosity pulled me in. I stepped closer, brushing dust off the cover. Just as I reached for the journal, a sudden noise jolted me. A loud scraping sound came from the far end of the attic, and my heart lurched. Someone, or something, was up there with me. I spun around, the flashlight finally flickering to life just as I caught a glimpse of a shadow darting behind a stack of boxes. "Hello?" I called, voice barely a whisper. Silence. I felt a knot tightening in my throat. I should have just left, but the grip of fear was stronger than reason. I turned back to the journal, flipping it open. The pages were yellowed and brittle. Hasty scrawls filled the pages, some barely legible. I could make out names, places, and frantic scribbles about the Watchers. Before I could process the words, the attic door slammed shut behind me with a force that shook the walls. The darkness enveloped me again. I spun around, breath caught in my throat. Someone, or something, was in the house after all, and I was trapped. In the dark, I heard a whisper my name. "Help me." It echoed, a chilling voice that wasn't my own. My chest tightened with terror. I needed to get out, but now it felt like the walls were closing in. I took a step toward the door, my pulse racing. The scratching jolted closer, sending me into a panic. I had to find a way out, but that journal seemed to hold the key to what was happening. I had to decide, unravel the mystery or face whatever was lurking. Then came a loud crash from below. The house shook violently. That noise hadn't come from the attic. I turned, realizing I had no choice. I needed answers, but at what cost? The dust swirled around me as I stood frozen, heart hammering in my chest. The whispering had subsided, but the heavy silence was just as unnerving. I gripped the journal tightly, desperate to understand what was happening. The faint scratches grew louder, dragging across the wooden beams of the attic like fingernails against chalk. My mind raced with fear and dread. Then I remembered the names in the journal, some familiar, some not. I flipped through the brittle pages, desperate to find any clue. I read hurried notes about the Watchers, followed by names of people long gone from my memory. A chill ran down my spine. These were names connected to my family, to stories I had heard in hushed tones during family gatherings. Just then, the attic door rattled violently and I flinched. Shadows danced at the corners of the room, and my instincts screamed for me to run. I took a deep breath and forced myself to focus. There was a draft now, an unfamiliar cold that seeped through the cracks. It felt alive, crawling up my back. "Get a grip," I muttered to myself. I turned back to the journal, hoping for some words of wisdom to keep me grounded amid the chaos. The last page had a hastily scrawled drawing, a crude sketch of a figure standing in the woods, just like what I had seen earlier. But there was something else underneath. Imagery of Watchers with dark, hollow eyes surrounded the figure. My heart sank. This was more than just an old family story. This was a warning. With renewed resolve, I started flipping through the pages, searching for more. That's when everything went dark again. The light from my flashlight snapped out, plunging me into deeper darkness. I could hear my rapid breath echoing in my ears. Panic surged. Before I could react, I felt a cold breeze brush past me, almost like a whisper of movement. I reached for the wall, trying to steady myself, when I heard it. Wood splintering from below. The house was coming apart. I had to move, but the shadows seemed to loom closer. My feet felt rooted to the floor as a low growl emanated from behind a stack of boxes. My breath quickened, and I felt a rush of adrenaline push me forward. I couldn't stay here any longer. I was drawn to the door, willing it to open, wanting to escape whatever had infested this space. As I pushed against the door, I heard a voice again, clearer this time. "You shouldn't have come here." It was low and menacing, sending chills down my spine. I paused, heart pounding. I needed to know who or what was behind this voice, but I was terrified of learning the truth. Then, like an omen, the attic door swung open, revealing a tall, dark silhouette framed in the doorway. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel its stare boring into me, heavy with intent. I instinctively took a step back, the journal slipping from my fingers and landing open on the ground. One page flapped wildly, the name Elena highlighted. "Help me," it whispered again. I was rooted in place, the realization crashing over me like a wave. This wasn't just a haunting, it was a call for help, but my next move could seal my fate. I had to decide. Would I take the risk to uncover the secrets buried here, or would I run and leave everything behind? My heart raced once more as I stood at the threshold, knowing I had to face whatever awaited me in the dark. Frozen in place, I stared at the silhouette in the doorway. The air was thick with tension, a heartbeat echoing in the silence. It didn't move, but I could feel its presence weighing heavily on me. The journal lay at my feet, open and whispering secrets only I could hear. "Please," the voice continued, softer now. "Help me." My instinct screamed to run, but something deeper held me captive. Why was Elena calling for help? I needed to know. I stepped closer to the shadow, forcing myself to see what lurked behind it. "What do you want?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. The figure shifted, still shrouded in darkness. "You're in danger," it said with a strange calmness. "The Watchers are restless." The Watchers. The term sent a jolt through me. I recalled the sketches in the journal, the hollow-eyed figures lingering in the periphery of the woods. Somehow I had stumbled into a situation far beyond my understanding. "What do you mean?" I pressed, desperate for clarity, but the figure didn't respond immediately. Instead, it raised a long finger and pointed into the dark corner of the attic. "You must go there," it instructed. "Find the truth before it finds you." Fear coiled in my stomach as I followed the direction of its finger. A large, dust-covered trunk stood in the shadows, ancient and foreboding. I glanced back at the silhouette, but it was fading, the edges softening until it merged with the darkness. I felt a sudden urge to run back to the door, but the curiosity of what lay inside that trunk was stronger. Gathering my nerve, I approached it cautiously. My flashlight flickered back to life, illuminating the worn wood. As I knelt next to it, I realized the trunk was secured with a rusty lock. Old leather straps hung loosely around it, worn but still in place. I pulled at the lock, but it wouldn't budge. I had to find a way in. Just then, the low growl from before returned, more aggressive this time. I glanced back in terror, convinced something was watching me. The air felt electric, thick with malevolence. Whatever lurked in the shadows knew I was opening an old wound, and it didn't want me poking around. Suddenly the trunk began to rattle, as if something inside was desperate to escape. I jumped back, heart racing. The whispers returned, louder now, spiraling through my mind. "It knows, it knows." Panic surged again. I had to get out, but I couldn't just leave. Not now. I was on the edge of uncovering something terrible, something connected to my family and the whispers of those who came before me. Taking a deep breath, I grasped the lock once more. I could either turn away now, lose my chance at understanding what had happened to Elena, or I could face the truth, whatever it may be. With shaking hands, I began to pry the lock open. That's when I heard the attic door slam shut behind me. A new presence filled the space, cold and heavy. I wasn't alone anymore. I spun around, my heart thundering in my chest. The door was firmly shut. I hadn't imagined it. I had heard the unmistakable sound of wood colliding with wood. I was trapped, isolated in the oppressive darkness. The trunk rattled again, a frantic beat echoing the rising panic within me. I darted my flashlight toward the door, hoping for some sign, some shadow that would reveal what else lurked in the attic. Nothing. Just the door, standing solid and unyielding. "Who's there?" I called out, but my voice trembled. It felt like a challenge, and deep down I feared what might respond. Silence hung thick in the air, punctuated only by the rattling trunk. Then I heard it again, the low growl closer now. My body instinctively pressed against the trunk, my hands gripping the edges for comfort. Should I open it, or should I defend myself? A chill crept along my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that something primal was aware of my fear. I finally turned back to the trunk, focused solely on it. The whispers grew louder, merging into indistinguishable chanting. They swirled around me, wrapping me in a blanket of unease. I wrestled with the lock, urgency lending strength to my fingers as I worked furiously. I had to see what was inside. I had to understand what Eleanor wanted from me. Then a sharp crack filled the air, and a split appeared in the wood of the trunk. I gasped, pushing harder. The lock finally gave way, and the heavy lid flew open with a groan, revealing contents hidden within. Inside lay a collection of tattered papers, some yellowed with age, others scrawled with frantic notes. I plucked one at random, reading the letter quickly. It spoke of a forbidden pact, a promise to the Watchers that mentioned names I recognized from family lore. "Elena," I breathed, but the name felt foreign on my tongue. Suddenly the atmosphere shifted. The whispers stopped abruptly, replaced by a heavy silence. It felt as if the entire attic was holding its breath, waiting for me to respond. Fear pulsed through me, and I glanced back at the door, half expecting to see something emerging from the shadows. Then I felt it, the unmistakable heat of breath on the back of my neck. I froze, adrenaline surging. I was not alone. I turned slowly, my flashlight beam dancing along the wall, searching the corners. My fingers tingled as I gripped the edge of the trunk, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from the doorway. Then I saw it, a shadow, shifting just beyond the crack at the door's edge. I swallowed hard, the reality crashing down as I realized the presence wasn't just in my mind. It was real and watching. My instincts screamed to flee, but I couldn't just leave the journal behind. It was my only connection to the truth. I had to act fast. As I snatched another letter from the trunk, I finally understood. The Watchers were real, and they were waiting for me to uncover the truth. When I turned back to confront the shadow, the attic filled with an overwhelming darkness, swallowing my light. I was plunged into blackness. In that moment of utter chaos, one thought pierced through the fear. If I couldn't uncover the truth, they might come for me next. I blinked, trying to make sense of the sudden darkness that enveloped me. The flashlight flickered, illuminating the corner of the attic for a split second. I held my breath, praying it would come back to life, but the light died, leaving me in an all-consuming void. Panic clawed at my throat. I stumbled back, my feet hitting the trunk. My heart raced, and I strained to hear anything, footsteps, a breath, a whisper, anything that might confirm I wasn't alone. Then I heard it again, the same low growl. This time it sounded right beside me. I whipped around, adrenaline sparking through my limbs. Was it the darkness playing tricks on me, or was there someone close enough to touch? The trunk loomed behind me, a reminder of the secrets I had just unearthed. My fingers brushed the tattered letters still scattered across the lid. I couldn't leave without knowing more. I forced myself to focus, carefully feeling through the contents, even as dread rode my spine. My hand landed on a particularly thick envelope. I pulled it out, tearing it open despite the fear coursing through me. Inside there was a drawing, a figure standing among looming shadows, arms stretched wide, surrounded by the same names I'd seen in the earlier letter. Among them was one I recognized all too well, mine. "What is this?" I whispered to the empty room. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled in response. Then, without warning, the growl erupted into a snarl, and I felt a rush of wind brush past my cheek. I gasped, the envelope slipping from my fingers and fluttering to the floor. I couldn't see anything, but the presence felt closer, more tangible than before. I had to move, I had to get out of there. I spun toward the door, and with trembling hands I tried to force it open. The handle turned, but the door remained resolutely shut. "Please!" I shouted, pounding against the wood. "Let me out!" But no one answered. Instead, there was a sudden chill in the air. The growl came again, but transformed, a rumbling, echoing laugh that reverberated through my bones. It wasn't just an animal. Whatever was in the shadows was mocking me. That realization sent me reeling. Was this tied to the letters? Did someone make that pact, and now it wanted me? All at once, the urgency to uncover the truth became a desperate need to survive. I backed away from the door, hoping my instincts hadn't failed me completely. There had to be some other way out. Just then, my foot caught on something slick on the wooden floor. I looked down to find one of the letters I had dropped, now splayed open. A name leapt out at me. Carlos. I had no idea who he was, but it felt significant, almost like a clue. As I leaned to grab it, the darkness surged forward, an eerie force pulling at my limbs. I barely had a moment to react as the shadows converged, swallowing the attic whole. "Stop!" I cried out, but the cry sounded small, swallowed by the night. Then, just like that, I stood alone in the suffocating silence. Something tugged at the edges of my memory, a warning, a story told in hushed tones. I could feel it. I had to remember why this was all happening. I couldn't just cower in the dark. I needed to face whatever was lurking, and fast. They were looking for me. I took a few hesitant steps toward the back corner, where the shadows were thickest. That's when I saw it. Another figure, barely visible, standing still, watching. Was it a friend, a foe, or just another watcher? I steeled myself to find out. The figure in the corner didn't move. My heart hammered in my chest, and every instinct screamed at me to turn and run. But I couldn't. I had to know. "Who's there?" My voice trembled, but I pressed on. I took a cautious step forward, straining my eyes to make out the shadowy form. It shifted slightly, revealing what looked like a face, pale, gaunt, and fixed in an unsettling expression. My breath caught in my throat. "Carlos?" The name slipped out before I could stop it, and the figure's head tilted ever so slightly, a small, almost imperceptible acknowledgement. "Why are you watching me?" I asked, desperation pinching my voice. Maybe he was a ghost, or worse, a manifestation of whatever was hunting me. The shadows around him seemed to pulse, deepening. "They see you," he rasped, the words barely escaping his lips, yet they struck me like a slap. "You mustn't stay." I couldn't understand. Who was they? My mouth felt dry. "What do you mean? Who sees me?" A low rumble echoed through the attic, drowning out my questions momentarily. The shadows throbbed and swirled around Carlos, almost as if they were alive. Suddenly the temperature plummeted. I could see my breath in front of me, swirling like smoke. What was happening? I backed away, my instinct to flee growing stronger with each heartbeat. "Go!" His voice was urgent, barely a whisper carried on the dark air. "Get out before—" Before he could finish, the growl returned, louder this time, intertwining with his words. I felt that force pulling at me again, a terrifying grip that ignited pure panic. I turned on my heel, racing back toward the door. My fingers fumbled around the handle, desperation flooding me as I twisted it again and again, but it wouldn't budge. "Let me out!" The snarl intensified, almost like it was eager for my fear. My heart raced faster than I ever thought possible. In that moment, I realized my flashlight had slipped from my pocket and fallen to the floor. I barely hesitated before reaching down to grab it, praying it would flicker back to life. The darkness pressed in on me like a heavy blanket as I turned it on, the beam slicing through the black. But the shadows responded, flowing and swirling as if to consume the light. That's when I noticed something retracing the line of darkness on the wall, an outline of what looked like an open doorway, invisible just moments before. Hope flickered in my chest. "Carlos!" I shouted, pushing against the fear that gripped me. "Is this it? Is this how I get out?" But his response was drowned out by a cacophony of growls growing louder, merging into a single anguished wail. I felt the weight of my decision at that moment. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I had to trust my gut. Without looking back, I dashed toward the outline, my heart pounding in sync with the horrifying sounds swirling around me. Then everything went dark again. I stumbled into the void. The world around me felt like it had collapsed. The cold air rushed past me, stealing what little warmth I had. I heard nothing. No growls, no whispers, just silence enveloping me like a shroud. Panic clawed at my throat as I groped forward, my hands outstretched. Was I trapped? Lost? Just as despair threatened to overtake me, I felt something solid press against my palm. A wall. I leaned against it, trying to gather my thoughts, but my heart raced uncontrollably, echoing in the stillness. I squinted, searching for the light that had disappeared so abruptly. In the distance, a dim shimmer flickered to life, and instinct drove me toward it. With each step, dread pooled in my stomach. What if I walked into some new horror? As I approached, I realized it was a metal door, slightly ajar. The faint light spilled out like fingers beckoning me. With a gentle push, the door creaked open, and I stepped inside. What I saw stole the breath from my lungs. The room was a forgotten storage space, cluttered with old furniture and dusty boxes, but that wasn't what caught my attention. At the center of the room stood a large mirror, its surface polished and clear, strikingly out of place. I couldn't look away. My reflection stared back, but it wasn't just me. Behind me in the mirror stood Carlos, his face twisted with urgency. I spun around, but the room was empty. My heart sank as I turned back to the mirror. "Carlos," I whispered, dread flooding my senses. "What's happening?" In the reflection, his mouth moved, but no sound escaped. It was a poorly made, silent film. Panic tightened my chest again. "I can't hear you." His expression shifted. He seemed to be warning me. I could feel it. Something was off. The air around me thickened. Suddenly, the growl returned, reverberating through the walls. My stomach dropped as the shadows shifted and pooled near the floor. Then I noticed it. The mirror was pulsating, dark tendrils curling at its edges, reaching out like eager fingers. Carlos's eyes widened as I stepped back. "You have to," he mouthed, but I couldn't decipher the words. No. I could feel it. Whatever was hunting me was coming closer, the shadows elongated, stretching toward me across the cluttered floor. I didn't have much time. I dashed toward the exit, but as I turned, the door slammed shut, trapping me inside. The growls escalated into a frantic choir of torment. I pressed my back against the wall, feeling cornered. "You won't take me!" I shouted, but my voice wavered. Then a loud crack split the air. The mirror shattered, shards flying outward like angry teeth, each piece reflecting the room in distorted ways. I flinched as the glass rained down, cutting through the tense atmosphere. And in that moment, as panic surged through me, my eyes fixated on a single shard. It glimmered on the floor, catching my attention, and there, in the broken reflection, I saw something that made my blood freeze. Something lurking behind me, its shape barely discernible, waiting and watching. I had to move. Desperate now, I lunged for the exit, but the shadows surged again. Just as they encircled my ankles, I heard Carlos's voice, sharp and clear now. "Choose!" What to do? I felt the weight of uncertainty crash over me. I had to decide, and fast. Where could I even go? Just then, the mirror in front of me flickered with an image, a glimpse of the attic, the one I had just fled. A way out. I took a deep breath, summoned every ounce of courage, and made my choice. I sprinted for the broken mirror, shards flying past me like daggers. With a final push, I dove forward into the glimmering chaos, praying it was the way out. Then everything went dark again. I gasped as I tumbled into the manicured grass of the backyard of the cabin, the sun's warmth striking me like a wave. The world felt too bright, too inviting compared to the suffocating darkness I had just escaped. I blinked, disoriented, and for a moment I thought I was free, that the horrors had finally released me. But then it hit me. The whispers were still in my head, murmuring names and pleas. The shadows hadn't vanished. They lurked at the edges of my vision. I rolled onto my feet, searching desperately for a sign of the lingering presence, for a shadow, a silhouette. Nothing but the crooked trees lined against the early dawn, their snow-white branches betraying no secrets. I ran toward the front door, heart hammering. I had to leave. I couldn't stay here a moment longer. As I charged into the cabin, the familiar scent of wood and fire greeted me, a hollow comfort. Yet something felt off. There was a stillness in the air, unwelcoming and dense. My backpack was gathered haphazardly by the door, as if I had left in a hurry. I shrugged it on, glancing over my shoulder toward the attic door, half open and looming like a dark maw. Would it beckon me back? Against every instinct I approached. The feeling of dread washed over me again, clashing with my desperate urge to understand. I needed answers, but I was afraid of what they might cost. I stepped up the stairs, each creak underfoot heightening my anxiety. The attic was just as I had left it, filled with dust motes dancing in the faint morning light. The trunk stood ominously in the corner, but none of the shadows threatened me now. I stepped closer, heart pounding as I reached for the journal still lying open on the ground. The page displayed Elena's name, her desperate call for help. But before I could process it, the air shifted. I turned as if pulled by an invisible thread, and there, against the far wall, a figure started to materialize. It looked like Carlos, yet the essence felt wrong, distorted. Dismiss the shadow, I thought, but my heart trembled, rooted in place. Why are you still here? I asked, knowing this time it wasn't just a figment. Find the truth, he said, voice echoing around me, both pleading and warning. They will come for you if you don't. Who are they? My voice quivered, the weight of uncertainty pressing down again. This was a fray between the living and the long dead. A history of tragedy was folded within these walls. They've awakened. His face twisted, shadows swirling around him. I blinked, trying to make sense of this reality, a blend of the supernatural and an abandoned past. Shadows flashed like whispers at the corners of my vision, intensifying as Carlos's image flickered. A memory tugged at the back of my mind. There was something in the trunk, I said hurriedly, about a pact, the Watchers. Leave, he cried, voice breaking, or they will take you. His urgency ignited a primal fear. What if this was the chase for something deeper, something entwined with my family history? The Watchers that had been spoken about so often. I was on the precipice of understanding, but with each moment spent lingering here, I felt the shadows inch closer. Instinct gripped me, and before I could contemplate my next move, I stumbled back down the stairs, out the door, and back into the bright sunlight. The snow crunched underfoot, a deceptive silence settling as I ran. I didn't look back. As my heart fought to find a steady rhythm, the whispers turned into an agonizing chorus. Help me! Help us! They echoed in the wind, promising to never be silenced. My mind raced to make sense of it all. Was this real? Or had I simply escaped one nightmare to embrace another? I was running toward the car, but ambivalence clawed at me. The looming presence of the cabin weighed down on my shoulder like a ghost. And deep down, I understood. Everything was entwined. The truth of it all, the whispers of the lost. None would release their grasp on me so easily. I jumped into my car, glancing in the mirror as I turned the key in the ignition. The cabin sat behind me, draped in shadows, its secrets swirling just outside the realm of comprehension. As I pulled away, the road stretching before me, a shiver traced my spine. The echoes followed me, their questions lingering like perfume in the air. Even as I drove toward the horizon, toward the light, I wondered, would I ever truly escape? I looked back in the rearview mirror one last time, and for a fleeting moment I thought I saw a figure standing by the cabin, watching. But before I could blink again, it vanished, leaving me with haunting uncertainty. What watches and what remains? And as I speed down the mountain, under grey skies and departing whispers, I know that some questions would remain unanswered, like shadows left dancing in the light.